Welcome to video 23, rounding.
So, when we're rounding, we're going to be looking at rounding to the nearest 1,000, the nearest 100, the nearest 10, the nearest unit, and the nearest tenths. So, let's start with our first number. Let's use our place value understanding and generate this number. So we have the number 2,000, 3 hundreds, no tens and 3 units. So let's write this on our place value position. 2,000s, 3 hundreds, no tens and 3 units. So firstly, we're going to be saying, let's round it to the nearest 1,000. So we're going to look at our 1,000 column, and here we know we've got 2,000. So we need to be thinking to ourselves, is it closer to 2,000 or is it closer to 3,000? The easiest way to work this out is to use a number line, where this is 2,000 and over here we've got 3,000. In the middle of our number line, between 2,000 and 3,000, we'll have 2,500. Now, our number is 2,300. So we know that 2,300 is probably going to be around about here as an estimate. So we're saying to ourselves, is that number 2,303 closest to 2,000 or is it closest to 3,000? And we can see from our number line, it's easily closest to 2,000. So 2,303 rounded to the nearest 1,000 is the same as 2,000. Okay, so we wipe off our number line. The next one we'll have a go at is rounding to the nearest 100. So, go back up to our place value position. And we've got here 3 hundreds. So we're saying to ourselves, is 2,303 closest to 2,300? Or at the other end, the next 100 on would be 2,400. We know between 2,300 and 2,400 we have 2,350. So 2,303 we know is going to be around about here, and that's really clear that we're going to be rounding to the nearest 100, which is 2,300. Last with this example is rounding to the nearest 10. So I'm going to wipe off my number line again and look back at our place value position. The tens in this number is 0. So we're saying, again, are we closest to 2,300? There's my 0. Because we're looking at the tens, the next 10 along would be 2,310. Between this point, we have 2,305. Our number is 2,303, so we're about here on our number line. And again, it's clear that we're closest to the smaller 10, we're closest to 2,300. Now, some people find it useful to remember that when they're rounding, if the number they're looking at, the previous number, is 4 or less, we're going to round down to our nearest, to the smallest number value. If the number we're looking at is 5 or more, we're going to round up. And we'll go through that in a second when you come to do your examples. So have a look at this example. We've got the number 1,645. We want you to have a go at rounding to the nearest thousand. So we're looking at this place value here and saying, are we closest to 1,000 or 2,000? We're close to the nearest hundred. So we were looking at this number here. We're saying, are we going to be closest to 600 or 700? And the nearest 10. We're going to be saying, are we closest to 40 or 50? So pause the tape, have a go, and we'll go through the answers together. So we're looking at this number again, 1,645, and we're rounding it to the nearest thousand. So here's our thousand number, and we're saying, are we closest to 1,000 or 2,000? Halfway between 1,000 and 2,000 is 1,500. And we're actually going to be looking at this hundreds here. We know that 1,600 is going to be past here. Remember, that 6 here means that we're going to be rounding it up. So 1,645 to the nearest thousand will be 2,000. Sorry, squish that in there. Next one. Let me just get rid of this circle so we don't get ourselves confused. So we're going to be round to the nearest hundred. So here we're looking at our hundreds column and we're saying, are we closest to 1,600 or 1,700? Halfway between 1,600 and 1,700 would be 1,650. So we need to have a look at our tens and say, are we close to, here we've got 1,640, so we know that's going to be around about here. Again, that 4 digit will remind us that we need to round down. So we know that we're closest to 1,600. Okay. Again. So lastly, we're going to be rounding to the nearest 10. We're going to be looking here and we've got 1,640, or is it closest to 1,650? Halfway between that is 1,645. And if you have a look, we've actually got here 1,645. We're bang in the middle. Now, you could argue they're just as close as to each other, but actually the rule goes that when there's a 5 that we're looking at, we're going to be rounding automatically up. So we would say that it's closest to 1,650. Okay, so we're going to have a look at rounding to the nearest unit and rounding to the nearest tenth. So this number here, I've got 4 units, 6 tenths, sorry, because I can hardly see it, and 4 hundredths. And I'm just going to put in my decimal point to show that these numbers here are smaller than 1 unit. So, round to the nearest unit. I'm going to get my number line out again. It's the wobbly number line this time. And we're looking here at the 4 units. So we're saying, are we closer to 4 units or are we closer to 5 units? In between 4 units and 5 units, we've got 4.5 units, which we show as 4.5. Okay. Remember, these tenths column is 1 unit that's cut up into 10 pieces. That's why we've got 5 pieces here. That's half of that. Okay. So now we're going to be saying, let's look at the tenths. Are we closest to 4.0 or 4.5? We've actually got 4.6 here, which is going to be about here. So we know that we're closest to 5 as our unit number. Also remember that because our tenths have got a 6 here, we're going to be automatically rounding up. So 4.64 to the nearest unit is the same as 5. Again, let's get our number line out. A bit straighter than last time. This time we're rounding to our nearest tenth. So we've got here 4.6, that's our first tenth. And our next tenth along would be 4.7. Halfway between 4.6 and 4.7 is 4.65. So we look at our number and we've got 4.64. So we can tell on a number line that the number is going to be about here. It's closest to 4.6. But again, we look at our rule. We've got 400ths here. So we need to round down to our nearest tenth. So 4.6 to the nearest tenth is the same as 4.6. Okay, so have a go at this question here. We're going to round it to the nearest unit and the nearest tenth. The number is 17.91. I've helped you out a bit by putting the numbers on your number line. Nearest unit, it would be either 17 or 18. Halfway between that is 17.5, so you need to look at your tenths, position it on your place value position. Remember, you can always use the rule to help you if you're going to round it up or down. Rounding to the nearest tenth, I've got 17.9. The next tenth would be 18.0, because remember, when we've got 10 tenths, that creates a unit. So we'll have 18 whole units for the next tenth. In between that is 17.95. So pause the video and then we'll go through the answers. So rounding 17.91 to the nearest unit. So we've got 17.9. That's what we need to look. We're looking at our tenths to see which unit is it closest to. 9 here, we know that we automatically need to move it up. So if I was to plot it here on our number line, it would be about here for 17.9, and we know that the nearest unit would be 18. Nearest tenth, we've got 17.91. Just rub this off so we don't get confused. So the nearest tenths are 17.9 or 18. And in between that we've got 17.95. Here we've got 17.91. Our hundredths is a 1 position, so we know we're automatically going to round it down. But if I was to plot it on our number line, it would be about here, or probably a bit smaller along, and therefore we know that we're going to round it down to 17.9 as our nearest tenths. So let's put our new learning onto our number mind map. We're going to go up to here to place value. I'm going to stretch and write rounding here. We round it to the nearest 1,000, 100, 10, units and tenths. We knew that we needed to use a number line to help us out. But actually the rule could say if we've got 1, 2, 3 and 4, we're going to round down. 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9, we're going to round up.